Okay, awesome. Thank you. And I've got all your little face boxes as best I can when there's this many folks in my chat up too. So Jill will, thank you, Katie. Jill will be monitoring that chat for sure, and she will know to jump in and stop me if needed. So please don't hesitate to type questions, comments, whatever, and she'll address anything as it comes up. All right, well, I'm super excited. Today we're going to be talking about leading up or managing up. And I put both these terms here because it really could be called either. So you've probably heard leading up, you've probably heard managing up. I'll sort of interchange them a little bit as we go throughout. But really, that's the main goal. And when you read the event description, it said something like, we're going to talk about why, we're going to talk about what to do, we're going to talk about how to do it. And we're going to hit on all of those things. But we are going to start off with some of my favorite way to start off some of our events is a little bit of an introduction followed by a little bit of who you are. So we'll have a little bit of conversation up front here. So bear with me. But one thing, if you haven't been to one of my events before, although we're on mute, although there's a lot of us here, it's very interactive. So please participate in the chat, have your keyboard ready to go, have your thumbs ready to go. I want a lot of conversation as we go along. All right, so first of all, I'd love to just start popping it in the chat. How many of you are new to an Amelavita workshop? If so, just type new. We'd love to see that. So welcome either way. We are Amelavita for those of you who are new. Lots of news here. Fabulous. I want to talk just for a minute about Amelavita, and I'll talk a little bit about myself as well. One thing that we like to say here is great leaders aren't born, they're made. And hopefully you'll get to experience that a little bit today as we talk about some of these great things that we can do to develop and build our leadership or managerial, either one, skills as we grow. But Amelavita really means love your life. So it's all about this way to say, hey, we're going to go love our lives, no matter whether that's from a personal standpoint. Maybe it's a personal goal, a fitness goal. Jill is one of our great wellness coaches. So if you have some health goals, you might be working with a Jill. Maybe it's from a leadership standpoint. I just want to be a better leader. I want to have a happy team and a happy life. So we really do span the whole gamut. So we focus on leadership, career, life, and health. Really does love your life. Amelavita really does mean love your life. And we really want our leaders to not only love their lives, but really develop their skills so that they can support their teams on loving their lives too. And in this case, where we're talking about, we're here as a leadership event, but you may not be in a leader or managerial position. You might be thinking about developing or growing into one, but you want to use and leverage the skill of leading and managing up. But why not in the process make sure that you're both loving your life, but also kind of helping your manager to do the same? Because at the end of the day, it may not feel like it, but when we're talking about this leading up and managing up, it's about making your manager happy too, because if we can make, it's kind of like the old weird term, happy wife, happy life, although it's kind of cliche and I don't care for the term, but it's the same concept, right? Happy manager, happy life. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So we're really putting this focus on happiness and showing up as our best selves. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So I am Jennifer Maynard. Although I'm a little bit sluggish, my brain's a little foggy, and you'll probably hear me trip up on my words because I'm not myself today. I am the Director of Leadership Solutions here at Amelavita. And really that just means I get the chance to not only work with a number of individuals like yourselves, but help develop curriculum, come and do great events like this, make sure that our clients and our customers, all the corporations that we support, are really showing up as their best selves to support, develop, and grow their teams. So I get to kind of touch anything and everything that has to do with leadership. So if you haven't had a chance to work with me before, maybe you'll get to in the future, but I'm also just here to answer any questions should you have any, regardless of it being about yourself independently or about your company or organization. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I want to hear where everybody's from. So this is always fun. What city, state, country? Last time we had a lot of wild country responses out there. So where are you from and what company too? That's always kind of fun too, to know where folks are from. Obviously I'm from Amelavita. I used to work at Boeing. So it's just kind of interesting to see where folks are from too. Ooh, oh, look at all this. Yay, fun all over the place. We keep seeing a lot of Arizona, which is fun. I saw a Texas in there. I'm in Houston, Texas. Jill's in Chicago. We have Libby on the phone. She's in Seattle. I'm not sure who else from the team. Okay, this is great. All over Italy. Wow, we really are all over the place. So wonderful. South Carolina, my daughter was born in Charleston. Okay, fabulous. Well, this is great. And keep dropping those, what companies that you work for, even if it's like self-employed, whatever. It's just interesting. It's always fun for us to know where everyone's from. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, probably one of my last sort of personal questions. I just want to know, are you working from home or are you working in an office, or maybe you're in like a hybrid where some days you go in, some days you don't. We've been finding that really interesting to kind of know where folks are, what's going on. It's usually a little bit of a mix. Yeah, seeing a bit of a mix again. And then those of you who are current clients, I know we had a lot of new folks, so maybe there won't be as many as usual, but those of you who are current clients, just give a shout out and say, who your coach is, and feel free to tell us how things are going. We just always love to hear from our clients too, and kind of see who we have on the line. Great responses. Thanks everyone for being really active and participating. Already you're going to get a lot more out of it because you're available and you're here and you're paying attention, which is great. So logistics, you're already hitting the nail on the head. Participate, please tune out all of those distractions. Make sure that you're just fully present. And I'll get into some of those details in a moment because I have a couple other things that I want to share. But I mentioned we're going to talk about the why, the what, and the how, and we're really going to hit on the most important pieces of that. My hope truly is that you will take an action out of today. So I'll prompt you for that at the end. What action are you taking? What one thing did you learn? What blind spot did you identify about yourself? Just anything that will help you be really prepared to take something from today and move forward. And then I will share a little bit about how we at Amelavita can support and help you. We're a career coaching company, and obviously we're doing things like these workshops and stuff as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that briefly. And then as Jill mentioned, we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A as well. Always a fun time to get those last couple of questions answered, especially if you have something really specific that I didn't hit. So feel free to jot those down as we go. All right, so please do be present. Jill already announced, and Zoom announced, since she yells at you now when you log into these things, that the session's being recorded. So it will be on our YouTube channel later. So you'll be able to go back and rewatch it, or share with a friend or coworker or someone who wasn't able to attend. If you think it's great information, we always encourage you to share with others. This is a short link, a bit.ly links, which means it's case sensitive. So those ALV or capital events are lowercase. We'd love for you to go out, register for some of the next events. We've got a couple other great ones coming up. Don't forget to consider, as you're going through today, getting your career development sponsored. If you need a little support with what that might look like, we do have what we call an e-coaching module, which is just a nice little self-guided module to help you kind of craft a letter of how you would request for those funds to be paid for. Jill, if you could make a note, let's make sure we drop that into the follow-up. We'll send that module out. We usually do, but I'm not sure if we've sent it over the last couple of times. So we'll drop that in just as a resource, just in case that's an opportunity for you, just a way to kind of put your thoughts together around what sort of sponsorship you may want from your company. And then the last piece, I'm going to mention this at the very end, but I won't mention it much because as we go through today, really want you to get a lot out of the content. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we support teams and corporations. But if you know that you're here, you're ready, or any time throughout the conversation today that you would like to talk to one of our specialists and get a feel for the specific goals that you're working on, how a coach can support you with that, this is the quick bit.ly link to go in and schedule that time. Real simple, just get that time scheduled anytime throughout the presentation. That way you feel like you can not only get the spot that you want, but what will happen there is as you're going through today, you're writing down some goals, you're getting some awareness. Here's my blind spots. Here's the things that I want to work on. You can take that to that conversation, and the individual that you will speak to, whether that's Brittany or Justice, whoever it is that you speak to, they will be able to match you with the perfect coach based off of your needs, your skills, and your goals, and your style, not skills, style, excuse me. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, that's the link. I'll drop it at the end again, but it's not the highlight of the conversation today. So make sure you had it up front if you wanted it. Okay, so leading up and managing up. I want to hear from some individuals today. What do you think you're going to gain from this conversation? We're going to be talking about leading up and managing up. What are you going to gain from this conversation? I know it takes a minute. We got to think and we got to type up a sentence or two, but drop that in the chat. What are you going to gain as we go through the conversation today? And as you're thinking about this and as you're sharing that thought, are you a manager? Are you a manager? Is it going to be helpful for you, not only because you need to know as you continue to go up, but because maybe it'll help you further down as well, possibly. Yeah, how to build better relationships with my supervisor, improve communication, communicating effectively. Well, the good news is we have some great past events on communication. So I'd encourage you to go out to that YouTube channel and check out some of those good past communication ones. We talk a lot about listening to be heard and understood, So some really good stuff out there. How not to offend supervisors with less or no work experience. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, okay. How to take more initiative, anticipating managers' needs. Love that. Love that. I'm hearing a lot about communication, gain respect of peers. That is a really good one too. That we don't talk a ton about that peer component today, but 100% it's going to bleed into what we're having the conversation around. Managing board level expectations. I think these are all so great. So really good stuff here. I think in some way we'll at least touch on all of this. Obviously, we're only going to have a very limited amount of time. These are great topics to be working on with your coach to be building and developing skills in that one-on-one basis. But those of you who kind of said those, maybe just jot it down so you don't forget, and then we'll circle back to anything that maybe was left loose. Another chance to become a better listener. Great. Patricia, active listening skills. Those are not only past events that we do, but from our Elevate Leaders program, that's one of the main things that we talk about is showing up as a coach, listening, questions, feedback. So really great stuff. Okay, so this may feel like the same question or it may not, depending on how you read into it. But what do you expect to change? So if you become good at managing and leading up, what would you expect to actually change? How is it going to feel? Is it going to feel any different? Is it going to look any different? Feel free to type some more of that in the chat as well. But that's a good, almost even like rhetorical, like I want you to really think about it. So as we go through today and you write down a few key tips, maybe you take a quick screenshot of a slide that you really like, you think about some blind spots that are going to be really important for you to reflect on. I want you to go back to this rhetorical question for yourself too. What do you expect to change? And make sure that you are challenging yourself appropriately or finding an accountability partner or coach to challenge you appropriately with whatever that looks like for you and what a goal might even look like around that too. So seeing a lot of really great stuff in the chat. Connected, productive, impact. Love that word impact. Alignment. Yeah, these are great. So good. What I love about these comments too is if you don't have your chat up real super handy, pull it up, make it bigger, read what others are saying. You know, what are you seeing here? Is anything here that really resonates for you? This is probably the best example of effective group coaching without everyone else actually speaking. You get to see everyone else's comments. Ooh, I like that. I like alignment. I like impact, whatever it is. See what really resonates for you. Okay, so here we are. Why is the first kind of question, the first point. And I'll be honest with you, this is the only slide on why. There are no bullets. We're going to just have a conversation. So I want to know, and this is another one I keep probing you, but I want to know, why should you manage or lead up? Why does it matter? We've had a lot of really great comments already in the conversation, but we keep seeing some themes here. Communication is one that keeps coming up. Who doesn't just want to be able to communicate more effectively? Who doesn't just want to be able to have a better relationship with all of those around us? At the end of the day, you know, I don't have the statistics. I should probably have it memorized, right? But we spend thousands of hours at work, and whether you're at home like I am right now in your office, or whether you're physically in the office, the reality is the big chunk of our time is spent at work. And when we think about managing or leading up, it's an ability for us to create and foster better relationships with those all around us. So it could be our peers. I do honestly think you'll see trickle down below for those of you who are managers and leaders, but then also up as well. Who doesn't want to just have great relationships, great environment, happy culture, all of those sort of positive things? And I think when we get really, really busy, it's really easy for us to just kind of put our heads down and go, whether that's a bulldozer or whether that's just a recluse. Like everyone kind of has a different way that they show up when they're maybe a little burned out, overwhelmed, overworked, maybe even a little bit unhappy. Like there could be a lot of things that go on with you personally that start to really impact the way that you work and collaborate with others. And if we don't take that time to stop, pause, take a deep breath, take a step back, and really kind of look at what's going on in these relationships around us, how are we going to be effective? You know, it's interesting to think about when we think about leading up, and I'll have a don't slide in a minute here, which I'm hoping will resonate with a lot of you. But, you know, a lot of people just instinctively think, oh, I need to lead up or manage up because my boss doesn't know what they're doing. That's not necessarily what this is all about, right? So I'm hoping that I'll be able to challenge your thinking a little bit around why it matters and why it's important. And I hope that the how we do it really is what truly actually answers the why at the end of the day. So kind of keep that in mind as we go into the next portion. So what does it actually mean to manage your lead up? So I just sort of hinted at this. So I actually want to pull up a slide that says what it's not first. Because I hear this a lot from individuals. They'll say, yeah, I have a bad manager. I really need to manage up. And I think they're stuck in the wrong impression of what it really means to manage up and lead up. So managing up is not about being really bossy and telling your boss what to do and being overly directive and being overly pointed. It's not about like having this confidence to just come in and tell them as it is. That's not what this is. Okay. And as we get into the how, you'll see a little bit more of that. You'll feel a little bit more of that. It's not about getting involved in work that frankly maybe you don't need to be involved in, or work that's confidential, or going to meetings that you don't need to be in. A lot of people think, oh, I need to manage up and lead up because I gotta wiggle my way into those meetings. That may not be appropriate, right? So what's the right way to get visibility? What's the right way to do that? And it's probably not wiggling up from this leading up, managing up perspective and being somewhere where you don't belong or you don't need to be. I think the one that's really key here too, because I feel like I hear this a lot just in casual conversation, telling your boss how to do their job. Like a lot of individuals will say, and I'm sure all of us have thought this at one point, maybe even like if you're comfortable, just admit, yes, I have. We're like, oh my gosh, like I can do my job so much better than them. I could do their job so much better than them. I just want to tell them what to do. They're doing it wrong. Like the reality is we've probably all been there at some point in time, but learning to manage up and lead up is not about that telling your boss how to do their job. It's also not a form of manipulation. So we talk about good coaching questions all the time. And one of the coaching questions that we say that we should avoid and only use when really needed is leading questions, because leading questions will really force and steer folks down a specific path. And sometimes manipulation can feel like that too. It's really important to me. I gotta shove my boss down the right path. They're going down the wrong path. I gotta put them down the right path. There might be a better way to approach it than just thinking about the skill of manipulating them to show up the way that you want them to show up. At the end of the day, it's really about relationship building, and we're going to get into that a lot. But I want to caution you that there is a chance that you could be in a job where managing or leading up might be really, 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 really hard. And maybe it's possible that it's not possible. And I know that's like a bummer, and that it's hard to hear that, but the reality is not every job, not every company is always going to be 100% perfect for us and a perfect fit for us. So I want you to be really careful as we go through this. What's in my control? What can I control? What actions can I take? And then what do I need to be cautious of as I move through this? What's going to work for me and what's not going to work for me and the relationships that I have. Okay, what it is. Again, a million bullets on a slide, but I thought it would be kind of fun here. So first of all, I want you to think about managing and leading up as something that maybe hadn't come to mind, which is this: it's about making your manager's job easier. Some people are going to hear that and be like, oh, I thought it was all about making my job easier. And I would argue it's not about making your job easier. However, it will make your job easier in turn as you make their job a little bit easier. So it's like, help me help you kind of concept. So just something to think about. So it's really all about making their job easier. Now, getting that past that point, it's all about building strong relationships, making sure that we're communicating clearly, we're communicating effectively, we're following up on conversations that we have, we're regularly meeting. And I have this bullet point here around norms, rules, guidelines. I like thinking about it that way because why not have sort of like an operating rhythm for how you and your manager communicate? Whether that is the literal, like you create, I've worked at organizations where we create like one page that's all about us. And we have a manual here at Amelavita that's like, what makes you tick? What sets you off? How you like to receive feedback that we all share with each other. So can you have some sort of norms, rules, or guidelines. And they don't have to be written. It doesn't have to be this formal presentation, but it could be something that you sit down and talk about together. Like, how can we most effectively work together? What is the operating rhythm, meaning how consistently and regularly are we actually meeting? And what are we trying to achieve in those meetings? I have it on a future slide, but we'll send out the effective one-on-one meeting template that we recommend. And this is a tool that when I'm working with leaders, I say, here's a great sample of an agenda that you can use in your one-on-one meetings with your individuals, with your team. Well, the reality is you can use that up too. You can use that up just as much, because the whole point of the template is you ask the employee to come prepared to talk about what's going well, what are their challenges, what help needed do they have? And that template gives them sort of that context to say, okay, here's what I need to be prepared for, and here's how I'm going to make this meeting with my boss effective. Well, why wouldn't you do the same thing for you? So I want you to use that tool up now as well, especially those of you who are leaders, or maybe you have this tool already in your toolbox. Start thinking about how you can flip it around and use it up. I had a great conversation with one of my clients a couple of weeks ago, and she shared with me this sort of personal aha moment that she had. And that was really around all the stuff that her and I had been working on as a leader, and all the great things she wanted to do better with her team, and tools she was going to use, and all of this stuff that she was starting to implement. I made a comment to her when she came in and said, like, I'm having a challenge with my boss. I don't know what to do. And, I don't remember what the context was. And I said, well, what would you want as a leader? What would you want from your people? And it was just like this big sort of aha moment for her of, well, yeah, of course, all the things that I would need and want from them down are the same things that my boss in theory would need and want from me. So when it comes to leading and managing up, all you're doing is reversing a lot of the great stuff that you expect, need, or want from your team down up. So for those of you who are managers, I want you to kind of have that context to say, if I want my individuals to show up at work on time, I'm thinking of a weird example, my manager is going to want me to show up at work on time. Therefore, if I want to do a good job leading and managing up, I should just automatically show up at work on time. Okay, very weird example, but you get my point. Using that one-on-one template. I'm going to use this one-on-one template for my team. My manager doesn't do a very good job of having effective one-on-ones with me, and I'm feeling like my voice is not heard. I feel like when we get together, all we have time to do is just talk about challenges and, put out fires. We don't ever get to talk about my career development. Boom, take that one-on-one template, use it up. Come in and say, here's how I would like to run this meeting. Here is the agenda. Here's the important things I want to cover, right? So all the things you would do down for your folks, you flip it around and do it up. Flip it around and do it up. It's a little bit of like the walk in reverse. You can kind of think about it that way. Okay, so I mentioned the norms, the rules, the guidelines. I do think this is extremely important because the two of you really need to know how to best work together. And every manager you have is going to be different, just like how every employee, for those of you who are managers, are probably a little bit different as well. And you probably have a little bit of some norms and guidelines and rules with all of them as well. One that some individuals struggle with, but I think is important to spend a moment on, is talking about this idea of sort of adapting your style to the style of a leader. And, we talk about that from a managerial standpoint, that any new job you're in, you kind of need to adapt to the folks around you. It doesn't mean completely change who you are, just adapt, evolve, adjust a little bit. Some individuals like feedback in person. Some individuals like feedback written. Do you know who likes what? How are you adapting and how are you evolving? The same is true for your manager as well. So if you change jobs and all of a sudden your new manager is just like night and day different from the last manager, it's a good time to stop and take a step back and go, oh, wow, how can I adjust a little bit about who I am and how I show up with this individual? What does that look like for this person? Is there some working style that they have that I need to lean into a little bit more? But think about what that might look like and how you could adjust your style to align a little bit more to theirs. I made this comment before around that not every job you're going to have this great opportunity to lead and manage up because there may be conflict. But the other piece to this is just that it may not be appropriate to lead and manage up all the time. It's like the feel the room, right? There are going to be times where maybe your boss is just really taxed or really stressed. And if you've built a good, strong communication relationship and you have written rules and norms, you know how to lean in and how to ask questions or ask for help or give direction should that happen. But if you don't know that yet, it's just a little bit of feel the room. There might be a day in it where it's just like, I'm just going to have to stand back and do my thing, let them have some space. I'll approach them tomorrow. So just kind of being aware of what's going on at all times and making sure that it's not just always about you. When we think about that, leading up and managing up, a big piece of it, a big component of it is truly just looking at how can I best serve everyone, not just best serve myself. You know, it's a little bit of that like servant leader mindset, even if you are not a manager. How can I still put on that sort of servant leader hat and support others, not just myself? I made this comment, treat others as you wish to be treated. I just think it's a good example. I mentioned like the go down, go up, but if you ask your team to do something, you should fully expect that you would do whatever that thing is for your manager as well. So if you are like, okay, I have them fill out all these reports and I have them do all these things, and then you're sitting here going, oh, wow, I would never want to do that for my boss, then maybe you should be questioning whether you're asking your individuals to do the right thing as well. So everything you would do down, you should be willing to do for your boss up. So I want that to be a little bit of an aha moment as you think through expectations that you have for others, for those of you who are managers yourself. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a minute. I've kind of mentioned a lot of things and we've talked a lot about communication and we're going to dive into some details here. But when we think about, actually, I'm going to go back because I think this is important. So when we think about what it is, not the what it's not, but when we think about what it is there anything on here that really stands out as like, wow, I don't know how I could do that. Like I don't have the ability to do that in my current situation. It's going to be really challenging for one reason or another. I should have put numbers on these, right? Because if you want, you could do numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want to count them out, and you could just drop some numbers in. But which of these looks the most challenging to actually start to do? Sometimes I think it's even just the simplest, making your manager's job easier, because we have our own jobs to do too, right? It's hard. So I'm getting a couple 4s, adapting to the styles of your leader in order to maximize success. Yeah. 3, norms. I know we don't talk about that. It's a little bit different, but that's a great simple way to start the communication. So 1, good. Yeah. 5, knowing when managing and leading up may not be an option. 5 is tough too, because we're in this crazy kind of virtual world right now. So it's not like, oh, hey, Bob, we just look at the cubicle behind us. Some of us are, we saw a pretty good mix, right? But still, it doesn't even matter. You're going to get the FaceTime all the time. And you have to wonder who's showing up today. How are they actually showing up? So I'm getting a lot of 4s in here, adapting to the style of your leader. So this might be a good future training that we could do too, where we could dig into that just a little bit more. Those of you who did say 4 and are thinking about that, as we segue into the next portion, I want you to think a little bit about how could building a stronger relationship and having better communication possibly support this. So maybe the adapting isn't as difficult as we think it might be when we really focus on building the relationship and adjusting the communication style. So just want you to kind of think about that as we kind of go through. But a pretty good mix. Okay. Okay, so how to manage or lead up. So I've got some words here, and I have the sort of big bullets the brain foggy. Words are in caps and bolded that we're going to focus on. And we're going to spend the bulk of the rest of our time talking about what's on here. But I do want to go through these a little bit one at a time. And what I want to start off with first is I just want to say on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, so 1 is I am not doing a good job. And 5 is I'm a rock star, that type of scale. I want to say for each of these, and we'll go one at a time. So the first one, relationship building. How would you rate yourself on how strong of a relationship you currently have with whoever, like the manager or leader you most have in mind that you want to use these skills with. Minus infinity. Oh goodness, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to laugh, but you did make me giggle. That was a good answer. Um, so just try to envision maybe one person, maybe it's not, maybe you've got a few people in mind and okay, so we're a little bit all over the board. Okay. So current relationships really ranging 2 to 4. There are a couple 5s, which is great. I'm not really seeing any like 1s, a couple 2s in there, and 1 minus infinity. Sorry about the minus infinity. Okay, so when we think about this concept of relationship building, obviously not everyone, those of you who are 4s and 5s, maybe it's not as much of a challenge for you, but I want to ask you this. What would take you from those of you who are 2s and 3s? What are going to take you up one notch? What's something you can think of right now today? What's one thing you can think of right now today that you could do to take yourself up 1 point? And maybe even those of you who are 5s, what would make you a 6? What would take you off the scale? And those of you who are 5s, maybe even just drop in 1 or 2 of the things that you currently do to maintain a really strong, healthy relationship with your leader. I think it would really benefit a lot of the others here to see that. We've worked together for 16 years. So sometimes it's time, right? We've just figured it out. We know each other. I do much better working for myself. I know. Aren't we the best bosses our own selves? It's so true. I have a great relationship with myself. I have no idea. There you go. Transparent, honest. Thank you. Thanks for being vulnerable and leaning in and sharing that. So I'm seeing some good ones here too about honesty, being honest. So I just jokingly mentioned, hey, thank you for being honest. And look, that's what's coming up here, right? So honesty, transparency, communication, these are so important. Communication is that second bullet, but I want to highlight one of the words I have up there within communication too, which is vulnerable. I want you to think about how can I use this concept of vulnerability with my manager to build this relationship a little bit more. And I want to give an example because I think sometimes it can be hard for people to understand this concept of vulnerability. First of all, go read some of the Brené Brown materials, books, podcasts. Gosh, I was going to say something else. Podcast, books. I don't know. It'll come back to me. And we have a great article, really simple article on the ALV blog. We'll drop that in the follow-up too on vulnerability. But I just want you to think about it this way, is when the conversation gets tough, when things are hard, being vulnerable means you lean in, you don't lean back. Okay, so that's going to look different depending on the situation and what comes up. But when I talk about leaning in, it might be something like, whew, this is a tough conversation. We should really dig in and talk about this. Leaning back might be closed off, shut down, saying nothing at all, right? So in one of those times where you're really sort of guessing whether you should shut down and say nothing and lean back or lean in and say something, think about how you can be vulnerable. Obviously, there has to be the context of it needs to be appropriate. It needs to not be harsh. And, we're not just like angry leaning in and yelling. That's not vulnerability, but it's leaning into the tough conversations. It's having those maybe slightly uncomfortable conversations.
Hello.
Yes. Did you have a question? No. Okay. If you do, you can type it back in the chat. So think about how can I use, no worries. Think about how can I use communication and that vulnerability to build that relationship. So basic words here, clear, transparent, vulnerable, but what are you doing and what are you not doing now? What could you change today that would make your communication more clear? It could even be something I mentioned, the one-on-one template, right? So maybe we need to have an agenda, a more structured conversation. Every meeting or conversation that we have, we need to actually think through what's the point of this meeting? What do we want to get out of this conversation? What is the action that we need to take? And then what would it look like to follow up at the end? Anyone who knows me knows that I talk about communication. We follow kind of a very specific framework, but the prep up front is really important. The delivery in the middle is really important too, because we don't need to just add in a bunch of extra fluffy words. We need to get very clear, specifically to the point. We need to check for understanding, make sure that that person gets it. And then that last component being that follow-up, right? We need to really make sure we say, hey, great meeting today. Here's what we talked about. Here's what we summarized. Here's our actions. Boom. So that we follow up. So anytime that we start to create a pattern around this communication of timeliness, like maybe we're having our meetings once a week and there's some consistency to that. We're having some clear communication. We talk about the actions. There's a specific agenda. We follow up and we're transparent. We bring up the things that need to be said. We're vulnerable. We lean in. Difficult to be vulnerable when vulnerability is seen as weakness. 100%. 100%. And that, to be honest, it's one of the reasons that I almost don't like using the word, because I think people just go, "Ooh, yeah, not going there, like danger zone." Don't go there. And that's why I like to use the example of leaning in when it's a little bit uncomfortable versus leaning back, because vulnerability doesn't mean crying, right? It doesn't mean you have to like put every emotion out on the table. It just means that you need to be able to say, this feels like something we need to address. Can we address this right now? Like, I feel like we need to dig into this a little bit. And that's just a good way to think about how to start small and just get small with that digging and that pulling in, because that gets other people to kind of start to be vulnerable as well, but in that more safe way. And then it says how to determine this is a safe space. Love that question. I think this is a tricky one as far as you determining if it's a safe space. So trust is one of those things where it's like, sometimes you just know, sometimes you just know or you don't. And another great example is I could sit here, like, let's say there's only 5 of us and we're actually having a group coaching call right now. I could kick this off and say, hey, I'm Coach Jen. This is a safe space. I want you to feel comfortable. Well, just because I make that statement that this is a safe space does not automatically mean it's a safe space. Like, you might be going, I don't know this gal. What is she talking about? Like, I'm not comfortable. So when you are the recipient, when you are that person on the other end that's kind of wondering, like, is it okay? Is it okay to speak up? Is it okay to do some of these things? Just start slow, test the waters slow, create those norms, and build to the point where you have that trust, where you no longer fear that psychological or retaliation is what I'm trying to say, not psychological safety. You don't fear retaliation for something that you would say or do, but only you can be that judge. As far as from a managerial standpoint, we have, I hate to keep saying we have a past training for that, but we do. We have a past training for that on how to build and create psychological safety. And that's actually something that we do a lot of workshops on with our clients and customers as well, kind of give some sort of tips and really start to talk about that. So I would recommend, especially if you are a manager, that's a good place to start. But it's another one where you can look at it and go, okay, how can I use all these and go backwards? Like, I just want you to always be thinking, like, if there's a takeaway from this conversation, it's, okay, Jen said everything that we would want to do down should also be up. So it doesn't even matter if you're a manager or not. How can you reverse it and do it up? How can you reverse it and do it up? Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Please keep putting some questions and comments in there if you have any along as we go. Feedback is another really important one. There are some companies that have really great feedback cultures, and there are some companies that have horrible feedback cultures. So quick, just in the chat, yes, my company has a great feedback culture. No, my company does not have a great feedback culture. We'll just get a vibe for how many folks are in different kind of spaces. Okay, a little bit of a mix. Yeah, not sure is a very common response too. A lot of no's, but so feedback is really important. Feedback is a tricky one because we like to coach our managers on how to provide better feedback. But what if you want to give feedback to your manager? Like, that's tricky. And it goes back to what we just talked about with trust and psychological safety. So this is where I say, I could almost put like numbers and rank these a little bit, but you need to have a strong relationship. It doesn't mean you need to be best friends, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to be best friends with your boss. I'm saying you need to have a strong, trusting relationship where you both know what you can get from each other, what you need from each other, what needs to happen, when and how to communicate it, probably some of those like norms, rules, and guidelines for how your relationship operates. When you start to have all of those things, feedback becomes a lot easier because it becomes a two-way dialogue where it's just a very simple back and forth or push and pull. That is the ideal, is that it's just a very simple push and pull. We have a framework that I use with a lot of my clients. Well, we have a deep, long feedback framework that we coach our leaders on how to provide effective feedback. But when you just want something quick and simple, or even as an individual, you think, well, how can I give feedback to my peers? Or how can I give feedback to my manager? We have this like just really quick, short, simple one that we'll utilize called like the quick feedback framework, where it's just a simple question of like, what do you think went well in that meeting? Here's what I think went well in that meeting. What could have gone better in that meeting? Here's what I think could have gone better in that meeting. But it's just enough of that push and pull that the other person is participating in the conversation. And then together, most likely you're going to land on the same thing anyways. And the reality is other people are really hard on themselves. So people might say like, oh gosh, I could have done better. There was a typo on that slide. I went too fast. I forgot to share this. My energy was low. And then if Jill and I are having this conversation, she may say, okay, Jen, sure. Yeah, there was one typo and we can go back and fix that. Or next time, let's spend a little time reviewing it. But in general, there was good response in the chat. Everyone was happy, like you're being a little hard on yourself, right? So she has that opportunity to join in the feedback, but she can also kind of let me know like, hey, you're being a little hard on yourself. So that's a good way to kind of start getting that push and pull two-way dialogue. The dialogue is one way that I find myself getting frustrated. She talks fast to make sure that there's no or little feedback. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. That is frustrating. So my challenge in a situation like that would be, what can you do to change or lead the meeting? Is there an approach that you could try, whether it is the simple like one-on-one template or something where the next meeting you go into, you have an agenda, here's the 3 things I'd like to cover, and you're just very clear and specific around those things that you want to cover. I want to cover what went well on this project. I want to cover what I could have done better. I mean, whatever it is, type of thing. Just trying to think of some creative ways to break it up. When we get into that rut and routine of just manager schedules meeting, we show up to meeting, manager talks at us, we go back to work. When we get into that rut, it is a little bit on us. And we need to figure out, well, how can I stop and how can I fix that? How can I, change the process? How can I be more engaged? How can I be more involved? Okay, so moving along down. So that's a little bit on feedback. We have some really great trainings on feedback, and it's another one to really dive into. But I go back to, if you want it to be really effective, it needs to be two-way, which means you're going to have a really strong relationship and be to that point where you can start having some of that dialogue and conversation. Okay, I'm going to move through the rest of them a little bit quicker. So care, I just have this down to basically say, you like the work that you do, you enjoy the work that you do, you care about the company's goals, the team's goals, the goals manager has set down. Now, if you don't, and there's a gap, that could be a challenge, because how can any of us really work effectively and do well when we don't care, So make sure that you have that component of care or you find a way to care. So maybe it's like, oh gosh, this one goal, I just don't care about it. I do it because I have to, but I just don't care about it. Well, what are the pieces around it you can care about? Could you care about how quickly you turn it into your manager? Could you care about making no mistakes? Could you care about training others to do it? I don't know. Like, how can you create some care around it? This is a segue a little bit into the know the goals, because it's really important that you understand what the manager thinks is important. You need to be able to anticipate the challenges that are going to happen before it even comes up, so that you can correct and fix these things. If you talk about managing and leading up, if you can come to your manager and say, hey, I noticed there's a problem, here's the solution, and solve it, boom, like right there, you're leading the charge. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. In addition to, you're creating some really great trust, and you're building a relationship with your manager, because now they just trust that you will lead and you will just show up and be that leader for them that they need. Manage time is another important one, especially as we're talking about all these like one-on-ones. But there's a lot going on here. When we talk about managing time, it goes back to no one's a good time. So a lot of us will just do want to do things on our own time when it's good for me. Like I'm going to push, like I need an answer to this right now. I'm going to push till I get an answer. Well, what if they are in back-to-back meetings, or they haven't had a break all day, or they haven't had lunch, or they have a really stressful thing going on? It's not just about you. So how can you be really aware about what's going on for that other individual and try to minimize the amount of push that you put on them? And maybe you even notice how hard things are and say, hey, what can I take off your plate? How can I support you when you're in this tough and challenging time right now? So think about, how can I take a look at what is going on for them and maybe try to find a way to make life just a little bit easier. And then I talked about the one-on-one template. We'll provide that in the follow-up, but if you don't have a structured regular one-on-one, get one set up. Make it that, again, that consistent regular time. And if you have one that's set up, make an agenda or use this template in place of an agenda. The point is, you want to make sure that your voice is heard and that you get the information out that you need to get out in those meetings. I tell my leaders and my managers, if you have a one-on-one with your employees and you talk and you do not listen, you have failed. You have failed. If you do all the talking and you do not do any of the listening or the question asking, you have failed. So if you are the employee, the person receiving that, how do you make a change to that? You make a change to that by saying, this is what I need to cover in this meeting. This is what I need from you. Here are the top 3 things I need to make sure we do in this meeting. Don't allow them to fill the space with their voice. So if you have one of those managers, I challenge you, you can use this template as a starting point, but I challenge you to say, here is what I need out of this meeting. Here's what we need to do. Boom, 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 boom. Go on down. Okay, speak up in a group setting. Ensure that you are letting your voice be heard. So don't just do all of this stuff in the one-on-one time, do it in the group too. Leading and managing up is a huge part of doing it within a group, because you will start to gain the momentum for yourself and for everyone else as well. It's better for everyone. So be focused on, how can I do all of this in a group setting? How can I build better relationships in a group setting? How can I communicate better in a group setting? How can I give and receive feedback better in a group setting? How can I show I care and know the goals in a group setting? Think about how you can do it all in that group setting. And then I tossed on set boundaries as well, because if you were in the training I had last week, it was about like, I'm a new manager and maybe I managed my peers before, right? There could be a lot of instances where boundaries can be tough. So do you have too much of a friendship? Are you, maybe even just you're working too much and you're allowing them to bother you at weird times of the day? Like, boundaries are really important for that leading and managing up, so that it's super clear what we all need from each other and how we're going to work together. So I probably sound like a broken record, but it's relationship building, it's communication, it's those boundaries that kind of lump in with those values, norms, ground rules, operating rhythm, agenda, the stuff, the logistics that we might use to make all of that better. Okay, so I want to leave you with that thought as we sort of transition. So we will be giving some of these resources afterwards, but I really want each of you right now, if you don't already have a nice little list, to reflect on what you can start doing now that feels comfortable to you. I mean, I threw up just a lot of stuff there, and the reality is it's a slow burn, right? You got to start doing all of these things so that it grows over time. This is not a flip a switch and it happens right away. You need to slowly start doing all of those. So I would like to see, drop some things in the chat. What's like one keyword that stands out, or one goal you wrote down for yourself, just whatever term resonates most for you that you wrote down that you're going to start doing right now that will allow you to start moving closer to having a better leading and managing up relationship with your leader, manager, peer, supervisor. So that could be any of these things from the past slides, right? Relationship building, communication, feedback, boundaries, whatever it is, okay? So as you're kind of writing those down, I want you to be thinking about how easy and simple it is to start doing that and what support that you could use along the way. So you've got a goal, at least one, you've got a goal. Now that you have your goal, how are you going to achieve that goal? We know it's not as simple as just, again, overnight doing it. How are you going to hold yourself accountable? Do you have a peer? Do you have a mentor? Do you already have a coach? Or could you potentially use a coach? So we're here to help. We'll have many more events like this where you're welcome to come and learn additional things. But my hope is that you will always start to transition what you're learning out into the real world and create some habits that are long lasting. Okay. Long lasting. So I'm going to touch on just a couple of things that we do with not only clients one-on-one, but also with our corporations and companies. So one-on-one coaching, of course, I've mentioned this a number of times, but really the key here is when you work with your leadership coach, you will have a sounding board. You will have that person that is there to help support growth and help you move forward with whatever goal you've identified, whether that's boundaries, feedback, like whatever that is for you. Okay, so that is just a tool in your toolbox that you can take advantage of today. So I gave you that link at the beginning. I'll flash it up at the end if you want to have that conversation. I'm also going to share the corporate inquiry link. And I say that because from a corporation standpoint, we do those one-on-one coaching things. We do workshops, which are very similar to what you're seeing here today. Usually a little bit more in depth as far as breakout sessions and other actions and things to go do afterward. And then we have programs as well that we design that have combinations of workshops, group coaching, one-on-one, all sorts of variants. So if it feels like that could be something that's a good fit for you, your team, your company, et cetera, you can use that corporate inquiry form just to dig in and get a little more information. And you can access that by this bit.ly link up here. If you're ready to just start with your coach one-on-one, that leader convo, that silly thing's in the way now, that leader convo is going to be the best one for you. Okay. We had a lot to cover. We did a good job. We had a couple questions in there. Anyone have, let's see, there's like 3-ish minutes left here. If you have a specific question that you like asked, please don't hesitate to type it in the chat here. I'm going to take a peek in the chat in a second. I do want to just follow up to say that you will get a follow-up email from Jill with the resources that I mentioned, and you can hit reply to that and it'll send a note to Jill. You can also email me. My name is Jennifer, Jennifer at alvcoaching.com. And you're welcome to just send me direct emails as well if there is a question that didn't get answered. Okay, so let's see. Heather has something here. I'm just going to check real quick. I'm wondering about not inserting where I don't belong. How and who can determine where I belong or not? I'm interested in growing my career. So I think this is a great question. And I would challenge you, Heather, to say, have you asked that question to your leader and to your manager? Have you had a career development conversation? It may not be the exact question, right? But why not say, like, what meetings would be appropriate for me to attend, or, you know, something along kind of those lines where you start sort of digging in and talking about your career development. The best thing to do is to actually take some time to focus on what is my career development plan? Where do I want to go? What do I want it to look like? Then your manager can support you on that. But if you just come with a like, hey, what are next steps? What do I need to do? Then they're not going to be able to help you, right? So be thinking a little bit about that too. Okay, let's see. It looks like there's Jill's answering some good questions in there. How to navigate your career goals when you don't have a supportive manager. Yeah, Bethany, that's a tough one. Informational interviewing, networking. Are there others at the company that you can speak to? Can you attend more training? I mean, I hate to say, can you work with a coach, but that could be helpful, especially if the company might sponsor it. Do you have an HR representative that you could have a conversation with around who might be a good individual? It doesn't always have to necessarily be your manager, but what I would say is make sure it's top of mind. If you aren't bringing it up, then how are they going to support you? They may not think you care. A lot of times what happens, the worst thing that any of us could ever do is make an assumption and make an assumption and make an assumption. So you may have just be making, and I'm just making an assumption about you right now, Bethany, but you'd be making the assumption that your manager doesn't care or isn't supportive. But if you actually said, hey, I'd really like to talk about career development, can you support me in this? They're probably not going to say no. If so, maybe we need to be careful around who we're working for and what's going on there. I don't know. Okay. We got about 1 more minute here, and I think we are going to bounce off in time because I have to go meet with a client after this. So, and I give my energy like an 8 out of 10. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't horrible. So, I appreciate all the great questions and comments and participation. It's super helpful for us to see the responses so that we can all support all of you better in the future. If you have even other suggestions of events or things you want, you can even hit reply to that email from Jill and we'll just take down note of that. But we accept feedback and love it. So please don't hesitate to share if you have any.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jen. And you did great. No one, I probably would have noticed that your energy was off just because we work together all the time, but you did fantastic. And clearly, according to the chat, everyone's very grateful. So thank you so much for showing up. As Jen said, we'll send this, the recording out with the recap along with some other resources that were shared, ways to stay in touch. Any of the links that were shared, we'll also include those in the recap as well. But any other questions? Well, I'll include Jen's email, but if you reply back to that recap email that goes out, that comes right to us. So any other questions, just let us know. We really appreciate you guys all showing up and hope to see you at future leadership trainings. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Great.
rest of the week.
Have a good one.